favorite VS Code extension is the Remote Containers extension because it allows me to have access to any languages or toolsets without having to install them locally. Super convenient for working on new projects.
My favorite VS Code extension is called Tab Out. Might not have heard of it, and this is what it does. It lets you literally tab out of quotes and brackets and braces. So if I press tab, I'm outside the quotes. If I press it again, I'm outside the braces. Tab out.
Hi, my favorite extension is Git Graph, since it allows me to manage the commit history in an easy and intuitive way.
Hi, my name is Harold, and my favorite VS Code extension is Markdown Emoji, because I want my documents on GitHub for planning look the best with all the emojis.
Is GitHub pull requests and issues, because most of my workload is on GitHub, and I like having all of that integrated also inside VS Code.
My favorite extension is Multiple Cursor Case Preserve, which does just as it sounds. You have a bunch of different selections and they'll have different cases, and I can type normal text and it will preserve the case in the text that I type.
My favorite extension right now is called Conventional Commits. It guides me through creating a conventional commit message, all the way from picking a category, picking a reason, calling out breaking changes, etc. So it comes really handy if you're using semantic release in your project.
I'm Matt Bjorner, and one of my favorite extensions is the Issue Notebook extension. This extension saves GitHub issue queries to a notebook inside of VS Code. It's really helpful for managing larger projects.
I enjoy the Theme Generator extension, which allows you to do just that, generate themes, and with just a click of a button, shuffle the colors and what they're used for.
My favorite extension is Error Lens, and what this allows you to do is to make your errors and warnings a lot more visible. You know when you're writing your code and you run into any errors? Instead of hovering over each item to see what the error is, Error Lens will print out the message directly in the editor, which saves you a ton of time. This is also fully customizable, so you can change the icons, the font, the delay, and much more.
Hey y'all, my favorite VS Code extension is called Prettier, which is great for formatting your code. Check it out.
So I have this code here that's absolutely hideous, but as soon as I hit save, look how much nicer that looks with Prettier.
I like the Excalibur extension the most, which gives me a scratchpad to explore ideas writing VS Code.
My favorite extension is GitLens for its current line blame and hovers capabilities, which allows me to see a lot of context behind each line.
My favorite VS Code extension, Code Runner. Use it with almost any language to get clean output to your console. This right here is in Python. This right here, C++. Consistent, clean.
My favorite VS Code extension is Template String Converter. Sometimes I'm typing a normal string in JavaScript and TypeScript, and then I realize I want it to be a template string with backticks instead. This extension automatically converts the quotes to backticks as soon as I type a $ and opening curly brace.
My favorite VS Code extension has to be LiveShare, which lets you collaborate together from different devices in real time. It's made working from home the last 2 years and working on code together way easier.
Ooh, one of my favorites is Indent Rainbow. Check this out. It helps me keep track of the indentation level with color. And as I hit tab here, more colors get added.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Hello, and welcome to VS Code Day 2022. Wow, exciting stuff. We are so glad you are here. Before we get started, before we do anything at all, I just want to take one moment and recognize the folks that are affected by the tragedy in Ukraine at the moment, whether that's family or friends, people you know, or fellow human beings. Microsoft has made a statement on that, which you can read. We'll put that in the chat. I encourage you to do that so you can see what we're doing there. But I'd like for us as developers to just take 10 seconds to remember those affected by the violence right now. So let's do that. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you for being here today with us. We do think that it's important to keep things going with great content for y'all and engaging learning stuff, which we're doing today. So a couple things before we get started. This is a totally new kind of event for us. It's going to be really fast. We're going to do a keynote and 6 sessions all in 90 minutes. Think TikTok style. And speaking of TikTok, You might see my phone here in the frame, and that's because we are streaming live on TikTok. Hey, what's up, TikTok? How's it going? So if you want to see what I see, you can log on and look at it on TikTok, and you'll get the behind the scenes view, but you can also watch the event there as well. Also, make sure that you check out our code of conduct, which is also in the chat there. We can sum it up by be excellent to each other. Be nice to each other in the chat, y'all. Y'all always are, so I appreciate that. All right, so that's all the time we have, which is no time at all. So without further ado, we'd like to bring you the keynote from Chris Diaz, Principal Program Manager at Microsoft on VS Code, and a special guest, Eric Amodio, the author of the most downloaded extension in the history of VS Code, GitLens. Here we are.
Thanks for the introduction, Burke. Hi, everyone. Welcome to VS Code Day. We thought it'd be fun to kick off the event by doing a little retrospective on how far VS Code has come along in the past year. So let's start by looking at some numbers. We closed out 2021 with about 19.5 million people using the tool every month. And as of today, we're up to just over 20 million. It's an amazing number. It's up almost 6 million from just last year. And one way we gauge satisfaction of the product is through the concept of a Net Promoter Score, or NPS. So if you've ever responded to a survey where you're asked on a scale of 1 to 10 how likely you are to recommend VS Code to a friend, your response is reflected in this number. So the higher the number, the better. And I believe the creators of NPS say that anything over 50 is excellent, and 80 is world-class. So at 67, we're doing pretty well. So thank you very much for recommending VS Code. And we gauge interest and satisfaction with the project by looking at the number of GitHub stars in the VS Code repository. And according to the GitStar ranking site, with 128,000 stars, VS Code is the 20th most popular repo on GitHub, and it's the top Microsoft repository. The way we look at the health of the extension ecosystem is by looking at the number of extensions published to the marketplace. Now today there are more than 29,000 extension authors, and you can find more than 34,000 extensions and themes in the marketplace, including new categories of extensions we added in 2021, such as machine learning and data science. Now the last number in the lower right-hand corner is the one I'm personally most proud of. We want everyone to be able to program using VS Code. We've worked alongside the community over the past year to identify ways in which we can make VS Code more and more accessible to everyone. For example, we've recently added audio cues to the editor, making it easier to know when code has been folded or collapsed, or probably more importantly, when a breakpoint's been hit. In 2021, the number of users who rely on screen reader support grew to more than 100,000, up from about 40,000 at the end of 2020. And today, we have over 120,000 users using screen readers to program in VS Code. In 2021, we made VS Code easier to acquire and expanded its footprint onto new platforms. So now we're available in the new Windows Store, we're included in the Raspberry Pi Linux distro, and we support Apple's new M1 hardware for better battery life and performance. But I think the most exciting platform to go live in 2021 has to be GitHub Codespaces, which provide a fully managed cloud-hosted development environment powered by VS Code and accessible through the desktop tools or through the browser. Now, Codespaces utilizes the same development container technology found in our Remote Containers extension, so you can have a reproducible development environment on your desktop or in the cloud, whatever works best for you. When we started VS Code, we said we wanted to ship like a service, meaning we could push a button and seamlessly update the product so that everyone runs in the latest release, the latest features, the latest bug fixes, and most importantly, the latest security updates. Now, last year we shipped 11 stable releases, one for each month, except during the holiday season. Now, on top of those, we shipped 22 additional releases to address critical bugs and security issues, but hopefully all of this was completely transparent to you. Now, if that wasn't enough, we also shipped more than 250 insider releases last year, and honestly, I'm just glad we don't name those like we do the stable release, where the January release comes out in February and so on. I mean, if we did this for insiders, then Monday release would ship on Tuesday and Tuesday on Wednesday, and of course the Friday release would ship on a Monday unless it's a holiday, and then it would ship on a Tuesday. It's very confusing. But probably more importantly, those releases couldn't have been possible without you. In 2021, we consumed almost 2,500 pull requests from the community. So thank you for taking an active role in building VS Code. So not only did we ship often, we easily shipped more than 100 new experiences in 2021. Some big, some small, but obviously too many to list here. That said, I want to call out a few of my favorites. Over the past few years, we've seen development tools and services become prime targets for security attacks. Our goal is to make sure that developers are secure by default while being empowered to customize their environments to work as efficiently as possible. So with trusted workspaces, you can safely view and edit your source code from unknown sources without the fear of the tools executing malicious code without your knowledge. And as you tell VS Code which workspaces you do trust, the tool evolves over time to provide you with all of the richness you come to expect, but on your terms, not on ours, not on the internet's. And as data science and machine learning become fundamental to the core development experience, we've been building notebook support into the core of VS Code, and in 2021, we were able to finalize the APIs and provide native Jupyter support right out of the box. We worked especially close with the community, bringing testing support into VS Code, where we now have an integrated test explorer and the ability to discover, run, and debug tests directly from the editor. And the same goes for bracket pair colorization. We worked with the community to bring the functionality of this wildly popular extension into the core of VS Code, where we could dramatically improve the overall performance by integrating directly in the renderer, or the UI portion of VS Code, instead of having to span the extension API boundary. I'd really encourage you to check out the great blog post by Henning on our site, where you can learn a ton about how we implemented this experience. The last thing I want to highlight from 2021 was the release of VS Code for the web, or as we like to call it, vscode.dev. It's a version of VS Code that doesn't require any installation and runs fully in the browser on just about any platform, including the Apple Watch, as you can see here. Not that I would recommend you doing development on your watch, but you can. And if you have a Chromium-based browser like Edge or Chrome, you can quickly edit local files and folders with vscode.dev. You can remotely edit GitHub or Azure DevOps repositories, including making commits and reviewing pull requests without having to bring any code locally to your machine. You can share your favorite themes through a convenient vscode.dev URL, so friends can preview them live. And there are hundreds of extensions in the marketplace that today work fully in the browser, like Luna Paint, which gives you the power to edit raster images right in VS Code. When we first started the VS Code project, our primary goal was to be able to write code in the browser. And in a way, vscode.dev is the realization of that original vision. But it's also the start of a completely new one. Where an ephemeral code editor, available to anyone with a browser and an internet connection, is the foundation for a future where you can truly edit any code from anywhere in the world. 2021 was a great year, and thank you for helping make VS Code what it is today. And I'm looking forward to what we're going to build together in 2022 and beyond. Stay tuned to hear more about vscode.dev and web-enabled extensions from Eric Amodio, the author of the GitLens extension, one of the top extensions of VS Code, which he recently enabled in the browser. Thanks again. Bye.
Hey everyone, I'm Eric Amodio and I'm thrilled to be here at VS Code Day. I couldn't be more excited about the mission to bring VS Code back to the web. The potential and power of bringing VS Code and its rich extension ecosystem into the browser is limited only by our imaginations. The zero install, accessible from anywhere ability to jump into a code base is extremely powerful, and it opens the door to so much more. Which is why today I'm so excited about our latest GitLens 12 release, which brings the power and insights of GitLens to VS Code on the web. GitLens supercharges your Git experience in VS Code. Now anyone from anywhere could jump into your code to understand how and why it evolved. Bringing GitLens 12 to the web was no small feat. GitLens required direct access to Git, the file system, and relied on many Node.js APIs, none of which would be possible on the web. Reducing the reliance on Node was pretty straightforward, as VS Code itself provides many similar APIs, and I set up a dual Webpack build to swap out functionality for each environment. From there, the hard part was abstracting direct access to Git. Thankfully, I already had some decent layering in place, so I refactored the internals of GitLens into a provider-based model to allow for the best provider, whether local or virtual, to handle each Git request. Once that was complete, it was time to build out the GitHub provider to translate the Git requests into GitHub API calls. While the GitHub APIs are rich and powerful, they don't offer the same level of access that Git does. So it was definitely a challenge to adapt what could and couldn't be supported. While the web support in GitLens 12 is in preview today, it supports a lot of rich functionality. We will continue to expand upon it as we go forward. Oh, and to any extension developers getting started today, please think about adding web support off the start. Take advantage of the VS Code APIs and avoid using Node directly. I would also highly recommend using URIs everywhere. Don't use file paths if you can avoid it. That was and remains to be one of my biggest challenges, is Gitlens use file paths and not URIs in way too many places. Anyway, let's dive in and check out Gitlens 12 on the web. Okay, so here we are on vscode.dev on the web, and now I'm going to navigate to the VS Code repo. Enter that in. Here we are on the VS Code repo. I'm going to now get Gitlens installed, so open the extensions view, type in Gitlens, and right now I'm going to be using the Insiders Edition. By the time you watch this, the stable version of Gitlens will be available, so definitely use that. And here now we've got Gitlens installed. We'll switch back to our editor. And now you can see that Gitlens is enabled in providing the rich inline blame and hover support that hopefully you know and love. So each commit shown here, we have the commit message, who authored it, as well as when it came in. So here in the hover, we can get even more details. You can see that there's an auto link to an issue, and then down below, Gitlens will show you that the actual PR, when it was merged, if it was still open or closed, and then same with the issue. So we can actually jump out directly by clicking on that and go find out more information about this specific PR. Gitlens also provides a rich file blame, so we can look at this across the whole file. So if we want to know all the different lines changed for this particular commit, we can quickly just switch and highlight of the changes that were brought in as part of that commit. And we can also get the same rich hover information as well. Additionally, Gitlens provides rich navigation through history, so we can just quickly jump to the previous commit or alt-click on it to actually pick some previous commit in time. So if I wanted to find out what this change actually brought into the file, I can jump in here and then specifically see the changes that came in as part of that commit. And the inline blame, the line blames, and the rest of the support also work in these modes as well. And then we also have the rich sidebar views. So if you want to look at all the commits in the repository, or just specifically for the individual file, all Gitlens rich views work in the web as well. And then in Gitlens 12, we have some great new feature, we call it visual file history. So this is a brand new visualization that gives you, you can pick your time frame, and it will show you, who made changes to the file on the y-axis here, as well as to see the size of the change. The size of the change is both the additions and deletions as these stack bars, as well as just overall. So if I wanted to get more information, I can click on these individual commits and dive through the changes on those as well. And yeah, so this will be a powerful new visualization that is available. Gitlens 12 also supports work trees on the desktop. They're not enabled on the web, but that's a powerful feature to allow you to work simultaneously on multiple branches. So it'll be a powerful feature there. And then we also have a new Gitlens Getting Started experience. So in here, let me just open this to full screen. So walks through all the features of Gitlens as well. So, for new or existing users, if you're unfamiliar, you can walk through to get familiar with how you can customize Gitlens, how you could get it to work and get the most out of it. So yeah, hopefully you'll try out Gitlens 12 today, and thanks everyone.
Eric, what is up, man?
How's it going, Burke?
Good. Thank you so much for being here. What's that?
Thrilled to be here.
Oh, good. Yeah, me too. By the way, someone on TikTok sent you a rose. That's how much they love you. I've often heard people say that Gitlens is the thing that makes their productivity really go through the roof, right? Like they're not sure how they could do their job without it. I mean, what's it like to be the guy who wrote the extension that is so loved by so many people?
Yeah, that warms my heart. I mean, it's incredible. And that's just like, it's been this vision of mine to like bring this, unlock Git and like take all this valuable insights out of your repository and really increase your Git productivity. So that makes me thrilled.
It's such a great extension, and the work that you've done to bring it to the web is just really astounding. I mean, I think the fact that Git lens can run in the web, really, I feel like any extension should be able to run in the web as well. But as you said in your video, it wasn't something that you just did. You had to put a little work in there.
Yeah, it was a massive investment, to bring that in. Been working on that since probably, started in August, but really ramped up a lot since for the last few months. And so it's been a massive amount of work to get that in, just, reworking the internals of GitLens to allow that. So it's been a great ride, but I mean, I'm just, so passionate about, unlocking this stuff for everyone and just to be able to bring that in. So like, enabling it on the web was a huge thing for me.
Well, we're so thankful that you did that. And what should people do now? I mean, there's two kinds of people here, I guess, right? There's people who use GitLens. What do they need to do?
Yeah, I mean, just, keep using it. Like, I mean, it is a big extension, so there's a lot of features in there. So check out the getting started, see about that. I mean, if you love it, leave, reviews about it. We love getting, great reviews. Just look at different ways of improving your productivity. I mean, we're continuing to expand the set of tools to, have GitLens unlock the potential that's in there and to help you better understand that code and enable that for everyone. Really, really excited about the future of where we go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So are we. And the second thing, y'all, is if you are an extension developer, is check out our docs on how to enable your extensions for the web. Eric, thank you so much for that keynote and for being with us today.
Thank you.
So I played today's Wordle, but before I send it to my friends, I'm going to open up vscode.dev. Trust me on this, I'm kind of bored of seeing the same green and yellow Wordle squares every single day. So let's paste our results in vscode.dev. Make sure you have the Wordle themes extension installed. And now you can choose from a couple of different emoji sets. So this is going to be interesting in the group message for sure. Let's change it up and do the fruits one. Nice, that lone banana right there. So now I can open up settings.json and actually create my own emoji sets. Make sure you set an emoji for all the incorrect and correct letters. So let's uncommon out this chickens one I have, and I can change it to that. Happy Wordling!
Awesome. So that is the Wordle extension for vscode.dev, which is pretty rad. And it's rad because you get to use it in the browser. And to tell us more about using it in the browser, we have Brigit Murtaugh. Hey, Brigit.
Hey, Burke. How's it going?
Going well. So I understand we're going to see a presentation from you on using VS Code in the browser. True?
Yes, absolutely. And it's been talked about by Chris and Eric so far. So I'm really excited for folks to see even more of what we can do with it.
Yes. Awesome. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, well, it looks like we have no audio on your fantastic demo, but we're doing this live, and that's kind of how it goes. So with that, what we can tell people here is, and let me adjust for our folks on TikTok, we are going to be posting this video on YouTube, so you can watch it there. I'm just sort of watching for the chat here to see if our producers can figure out why there is no audio coming through on that video. But in the meantime, Brigit, tell us, when it comes to vscode.dev, using VS Code on the web, why would I do that? Why not just use it locally?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of great like customized experiences you can get in the web. And so Chris had mentioned that there's like trying out themes, for instance. So there's these different routes or URLs that you can get these fully customized experiences entirely in your browser. So if you're already working on a repo or you're in the VS Code marketplace and looking at a theme, you don't have to switch contexts and go to the desktop. You can just stay completely in the browser, get the power of browser-based tools, and go to a /theme route, or you can go to /GitHub or /Azure repos and try out all these different experiences.
Yeah, so the thing is, though, I don't have any access to the file system, though, right? So if I don't have access to my files, then what can I reasonably do in vscode.dev that I could do in a browser, right? It seems like I would need VS Code for everything.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And for browsers where they have access to the file system access API, so that's Edge and Chrome today, you actually can access your local files. So you can both work on files that are stored on your computer, or you could even go ahead and access repos that are stored remotely. So they're stored in Azure DevOps or stored in GitHub.
Okay, so you actually can open certain projects on the web, and there is file system access in certain browsers. Which ones did you say those were?
Chrome and Edge today.
Okay, so no Firefox, no Safari.
Not Firefox. I'm not sure about Safari, but definitely Chrome and Edge.
And does it work on the iPad?
Yes, it does work on the iPad. So you could go ahead and do it on the iPad. We've seen folks using VS Code for the web on a variety of different platforms. We've seen it on a Tesla. We've seen it on watches. We've seen it on the Xbox. So anywhere you're feeling inspired to go into VS Code, you can totally use it.
Yeah, I remember when we first launched vscode.dev, and I went to a Best Buy, which for those of you, I don't know if Best Buy is like a global brand. If it's not, it's like a big appliance store. But I went there because they have refrigerators with screens on them with an internet browser. And I pulled up vscode.dev on a Samsung fridge and then was like, well, I don't know what to do now, but I did it. It worked. Success. All right. So it says, let's see here. Yeah, so they're fixing the audio on the video. I think what we'll do here, Brigit, is we'll just send people over to watch it on demand. We definitely want y'all to check that out. Brigit is going to run through and show you everything that you can do with vscode.dev as it is today, and a lot of cool tips and tricks that you probably didn't know about. So with that, Brigit, thank you so much for being with us, and forgive us for the AV troubles.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thanks.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
I love that video. That's such a great video. I can so relate. Good news that we were able to fix Brigit's video. So Lamont, can we go ahead and pull that up? Let's go ahead and get Brigit's video going here because it is awesome. So let's run that. No. Still no audio. All right. Well, we tried hard. We'll keep trying. So folks, listen, in that video that we just saw, we call it The Struggle, but it's real, right? This developing locally works on my machine, doesn't work anywhere else. One of the ways that you can fix that is with remote containers. And there's been a lot of work done by different people to get remote containers to make it easier for you to get started with different types of frameworks. And to show you that, I'd like to invite Alvaro to show you how you can get started with dev containers and Laravel PHP with no setup. So let's go ahead and run Alvaro's session.
Hi everybody, my name is Alvaro, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create a web development environment using Visual Studio Code and Dev Containers. Here is a problem we want to solve. Imagine you are trying to develop a website in PHP that requires MySQL and Redis, but you don't have much time to learn about the details of setting up and running those tools. Also, you want to have a unified environment experience so other developers on your team can get quickly up to speed to start collaborating in the project. How could we implement this scenario? You could use Docker containers to get your MySQL and Redis working, but you still need to orchestrate them to get the containers to talk to each other. Also, you need a coding editor that's fluid enough to let you develop your application and test it right away inside the container. Does such a solution exist? Of course. Visual Studio Code supports remote development via Dev Containers. With Dev Containers, you can use a configuration file that tells VS Code which containers to use for your application. VS Code will take care of starting the containers while making sure you can easily access them from inside the editor, so you get a seamless development experience. Let's see a demo. For this example, you will be using Laravel, which is a PHP framework that supports Dev Containers out of the box. To get started with your project, run the command on screen to install Laravel and all its dependencies. The command specifies that your application uses MySQL, Redis, and PHP. Also, that you want to use Dev Containers. Thanks to Laravel, you don't have to worry about installing any of these services. Laravel will configure these services automatically for you using Docker files. Now it's time to start working on your application. Run the command on the screen to open your new project inside Visual Studio Code. Now comes the cool part. VS Code notices that there's a Dev Container definition in your project, so it's showing you a prompt on the screen. Click Reopening Container so VS Code will restart the project inside a container and automatically create the container environment for you. Also, it will set up the network connection so the services are reachable from your PHP application. Thanks to the magic of Dev Containers, you don't need to know about Docker or Docker Compose for this to work. Visual Studio Code takes care of that for you. How does it work? Laravel supports Dev Containers out of the box. When you created the project, Laravel created a Docker Compose file for you. The file includes definition for the MySQL and Redis services. It also adds a container that comes with PHP pre-installed. Laravel also created a Dev Container definition. Visual Studio Code detected that definition, identified the Docker Compose file, and instructed Docker to set up the development environment for you. Thanks to the mix of all this cool technology, you could get a development environment up and running by typing just one command. What are the advantages of this approach? First, by having a Dev Container definition inside your application, you can easily onboard colleagues to your project. In the case of open source projects, this approach accelerates collaboration. Contributors to your project don't need to worry about setting up a development environment and go through the tedious process of installing dependencies. With Dev Containers, the workload becomes clone project, start Visual Studio Code, and then watch one of our TikToks while Visual Studio Code gets your environment ready. As you can see, Dev Containers will change the way you collaborate. Start using Dev Containers today. If you like what you saw, but want to dive into more detail, check the following YouTube video where you can see a full demo of Visual Studio Code using Dev Containers to work with Laravel, MySQL, and Redis. I hope you enjoyed the demo. See you next time.
Hey, that was awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing that. How are you, Alvaro?
Good. And next time is now. So see you next time. Here I am.
Here you are. Yes, that was so quick. Chat, if you've got questions for Alvaro, we've got a few minutes to run those by him. Man, I gotta be honest, like the fact that you can get, so what I took from that video is that you can get started with Laravel, MySQL, and Redis, but you don't have to install any of that stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically, we know people today have been using Docker, have been using all these tools, but by combining them with VS Code and their containers, we have the one command type of thing that, yeah, somebody in the team or somebody in the framework will set up the Docker containers. Of course, there is no magic. But once that was done, this is just replicated every time somebody wants to get started. Double click, let's say, you are working on your
on your project.
Yeah, and that's sort of the magic of the thing. I remember I often make this comparison with when I used to do Ruby on Rails, or when I was trying to get started with Ruby on Rails. I was on Windows, and back in the day, it wasn't super easy to get Ruby running on Windows, and so I spent so much time just trying to get my computer set up. And then when Ruby versions would change and gems, and it was all of that. But I guess containers, the idea here is that containers make it so that you shouldn't have to do any of that anymore.
Exactly, and also it's not about the container only, because VS Code, by working remotely, gets you everything tied together. Because yeah, you have the container, but how do I edit those files and pull them to the container? And is the container talking to MySQL? Solve that for me, please. That is what I want here.
Yes, getting everything wired up and networked together is no fun. No fun. So we got a question here. Well, it's more of a comment, but it says, PHP, really? Yes, PHP is amazing. It runs most of the internet, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know.
Exactly. I mean, we are not zealots of any language. We love all of them. In my professional life, I have worked in PHP, Erlang, Haskell, Clojure, JavaScript, C#. Right now, we're working in a project which mixes C# and Bash. So everything, if we get the job done, is what we want, basically.
Exactly. Whatever gets you there quickest, y'all. And I believe, am I incorrect that I'm going to throw this out there like it's a fact, but it might not be. I think Facebook is written in PHP, but I don't know.
It was originally in PHP. I don't know what is running there today, but it is a PHP shop.
Yes, absolutely. So look, if you want to get up and running with PHP and with Laravel, Laravel is a comprehensive full stack application framework. It really is. Alvaro, what should people do, even if they don't know PHP, but they just want to get started with Laravel?
Actually, I want to change your question. Since people say PHP, I want to say, go to your framework of choice, go to your language of choice, and add a dev container there, and get that framework to be also a one-command solution for your community. If you are working in Ruby today, you're working in Node today, you're working in Clojure, you're working in Haskell, I don't care. But add a dev container to those projects, do your first, or maybe not first, open source contribution, and let's get dev containers everywhere, because in the end, what I want is people typing one command and getting ready to work. Nobody has to suffer to set up a dev environment. This is gone.
It's utopia, y'all. Listen, Alvaro told you to go set it up, so set it up. All right, Alvaro, thank you so much for being with us today for VS Code Day.
Thank you, Bert.
Appreciate it.
You have to try this. Go to any GitHub repository and then press the dot key on your keyboard. Visual Studio Code will appear in your browser. It will load your entire repository and you can open any file from it. You have your entire source code with syntax highlighting and coloring. If you want to search for something, you can use a Visual Studio Code search capability to search in any file in the repository. If you make a code change, that code change gets saved and you can immediately make a commit inside your GitHub repository from your browser.
So that's github.dev, which is similar to vscode.dev, but it's embedded in GitHub. So we're seeing VS Code in the web in lots of different places. But the question is, what really can you do with just a browser development tool? Well, our good friend Ornella Altunyan took a look at that and has a session for you on what you can do without ever leaving your browser. Check it out.
Hello everyone, and welcome to VS Code Day 2022. I hope you're enjoying the day so far. My name is Ornella Altunyan, and I'm a cloud developer advocate here at Microsoft. You've seen us talk a lot about vscode.dev, but today I'm going to show you what you can actually accomplish using it. I'm going to give you a crash course in how you can create a resume website completely in the browser using the power of HTML, CSS, vscode.dev, and GitHub Pages. Having your personalized resume website is a great way to stand out to recruiters, and you may even learn a thing or two in the process. All right, let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing we're gonna do is create a new repository on GitHub. So let's call it resume, let's make it public and add a README. And we are going to create this repository and then open it in vscode.dev. So an easy way you can do that is just to put vscode.dev in front of the GitHub URL, but you can also go to vscode.dev and then use the GitHub extensions to open your remote repository. So we're going to be working with HTML and CSS files in this session, and to do that, we're going to download the CodeSwing extension, which is this really awesome extension that lets us live preview the files. And once we have that installed, we're ready to create our first page. So if we open the command palette, we'll initialize the workspace as a swing, HTML only, and then we have an index.html file. And we're going to put kind of the skeleton of our resume in here, so all of the content. I'm going to go ahead and paste in this skeleton HTML, and you'll get to see it pretty immediately on the right-hand side of the pane, which I think is really cool. And another awesome thing about CodeSwing is that as you update this HTML, so for example, if I put my name in right here, you'll be able to see that instantly on the right-hand side. And if you're new to HTML, it can be really fun to kind of play around, get it to be in exactly the structure that you like, and then get to see the preview immediately on the right-hand side. So you'll notice that it's not the prettiest resume in the world. So the next thing that we're going to do is add a little bit of CSS to spice it up. And so we'll go over to the File Explorer and just create a new file called style.css. And then into that file, we'll drop some styling code, which will make our resume look really pretty. And there we go. Boom. So now we have a pretty good looking resume, and we are now going to just commit those changes to GitHub. So obviously, if you're working on this for your own personal resume, you're going to want to actually go in and add the About section and all of your job experience and stuff like that. For the purposes of this session, we're just going to move on to how we can make that into a web page. So let's commit our changes. Head over to source control and just type in a little message, add resume content, maybe not in caps. And then we're going to commit that, and those changes will go directly to your repository on GitHub, which is really nice. And then to make the web page, we're going to go over to GitHub, open that repo once more, and we're going to use a built-in GitHub functionality called GitHub Pages. So once we get over to our resume repo, we're going to head over to settings, and you'll see all of the content we just added. It's right there. And we'll go over to settings, and then we'll go to pages, and then we'll set the source of our GitHub pages to the main branch, because that's where we wrote all of our code, in the root directory, and just hit save. And you automatically will get a link to where your website is going to be published. So let's just copy that real quick. And then the way that GitHub Pages works is actually through GitHub Actions. So if we go over to Actions, we'll be able to see the workflow running. And so right now it's in progress, and we'll just need to wait until there's a little green check. And then that means our web page is ready to view. And this workflow will kick off every time you commit a change. So let's hop over to our web page, and boom, there is our resume. You can send anyone that link, and they'll be able to access your beautiful online hosted resume. Thanks so much for joining my session. We're so excited to continue enabling you to do awesome things with vscode.dev completely in the browser. And now I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ornella, thank you so much for that session. Hey, how's it going?
Hello, hello. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Chat, if you have questions for Ornella, now's the time to get them in. We've got 5 minutes of Q&A here. I'd just like to point out that Ornella has a portrait of her dog on the wall. I don't think that we should let this moment pass. I think you can see it right there. There's Franklin. I think this is something they used to do back in the day. Like they'd have a portrait of the dog like above the fireplace. You remember that? Like in old movies?
I would be the person to have that for sure. That's my second portrait of Franklin. So, just starting a nice collection here.
Right, exactly. So Mike, I guess the question that I have is, and then we'll get to some of the chat questions. We got 2 or 3 of them, is how much does all that cost? How much does it cost me to have to be able to host this resume on GitHub and do all this?
It's free.
Fake excitement coming at you.
It is completely free, which is really cool. I think there's an option too, if you want to have a custom domain for your web page that's hosted on GitHub. I think you can pay for that, but like just to use the one that GitHub provides for you, and vscode.dev and making repositories on GitHub, all of that is free.
Yes, it is. And if you want, chat, if you would like a custom domain for your GitHub Pages site, might I recommend buying a .dev domain because they're pretty cheap and they work great with GitHub Pages. Someone did ask, Ornella, do you have any tips for beginners of coding?
So many. So I work on the education cloud advocacy team. So I'm working with beginners of coding all day, every day. And I would say, you know, pick something that you're interested in learning about. And it can be, you know, if you're interested in fashion, you can learn how to make a fashion app using Power Apps. If you're interested in, you know, finance or math, you can learn how to analyze stock data. So choose a project that you find interesting to you, and then check out our resources on Microsoft Learn. There's a ton of just like grab and go modules that'll teach you a new skill, teach you how to complete a project. And there's also a bunch of blog posts, our documentation. The internet just has so many free resources that are available to you. So I would say pick something you're interested in and just go for it.
That's great advice. And on that question about resources, we do have some resources for y'all. I don't know, producers, if we can get those on a lower third, get our free resources up here. That's great. Yeah. Awesome. So here's a question. How about using GitHub to publish a blog?
I think you could really easily do that. So if you look at the resources, there is a link to the repository on GitHub that contains all of the starter code that I used for this workshop. And it also contains like a full lesson on how to get started with CSS and HTML. So if you want to create a blog, you can really easily take that starter code or any kind of code you find on the internet that's HTML or CSS that gives you a nice blog layout, and then use vscode.dev, add your content, and then publish it using GitHub Pages. It would be a very similar process. You just kind of would have to play around with the HTML and CSS to get it to look the way you want it to. But that's one of the really awesome things about CodeSwing, is that if you're messing around with your HTML and CSS, you want to know how it's going to look, it'll show you right there. So you can really easily experiment with that and see what happens.
Yeah, the real-time, like live preview is great, especially as you mentioned in your session when you're doing HTML. And if you want to learn HTML, it's a great way to do it because you can just immediately see what you typed in. So I love that feature as well. Question, will your session be available for people to watch on YouTube? For people, this comes from TikTok, for people that missed it? Or
yeah, all of VS Code Day will be available on YouTube.
All of it, y'all.
All of it.
Every bit, every glorious moment, including all of the technical difficulties from earlier in the day, you can relive with us. Well, Ornella, thank you so much for being with us. And one more time, can we get those resources put up from Ornella's session here for people? Where do they need to go? What do they need to do?
There we go. Thanks for having me, Burke.
Thank you so much.
Have fun, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Check this out. If you go to any GitHub repo and you put your cursor at the very front of the URL and you type vscode.dev / and hit enter, this will load up VS Code in your browser and it will load the GitHub repo. And you'll have a full editing experience right here in the browser, just like you would on the desktop. Now, you may see that and think, well, that's cool. I can edit my code in the browser on an iPad. Yes, but that's actually not the point of this video. The point is that all I had to do that was slap vscode.dev in front of a GitHub URL. So the question is, if that works with GitHub today, where else might that work in the future?
Now, when I made that video some months ago, the big comment that we got back was you can code on an iPad. And yes, you can. VSCode.dev does load on an iPad. But there's some folks out there that are doing some really interesting stuff with VSCode.dev on an iPad, and they're called Blink Shell, and they're here to tell you all about it. So without further ado, here's Carlos from Blink Shell.
Hi, I'm Carlos from Blink Shell. Blink is an app for local and remote development on iOS. In our last version, we introduced a new Visual Studio Code integration that will boost your productivity when working from phones or tablets. Let me show you how it works. To start, I'm going to run the code command, passing a dot to open the current path. As you see, we're now in a Visual Studio Code web session, but I still have no files yet. To complete the setup, let's install the BlinkFS extension. And easy as that, we have now access to all our local file system, but also to any remote files. I want to point out a few differences between using VS Code inside the browser or inside Blink Shell. Inside Blink, you will see that we have a full screen experience without any browser bars or any other interruption. Blink also gives you an integrated software keyboard optimized for developers with special keys like Control, Alt, or Command, so you can start the command palette. And if you cannot live without your Emacs or Vim shortcuts like me, you can also install extension and use the ones you know. Now, let's take a look at remote development. I'm going to be using this Raspberry Pi, but the same applies to any other remote server. Now, this is the Zero model with very limited resources, and I don't want to install a desktop environment just so I can code it. So let's see how Blink can connect VS Code to it instead. First, I'm going to configure SSH access to my Raspberry Pi. It's going to host. I just have it right here. And then it's just as easy as running code, the host I'm connecting to, and the remote path that I'm going to edit. And now, I am connected to the same VS Code web session with all of my settings there, but connected to my Raspberry Pi file system. So, I want to run my code, but if you remember, there is no terminal in the web version. So what I can do is start one on Blink instead. We connect to a Raspberry Pi, and make the font smaller, and you can open. Run our code. Oops, looks like I have a small mistake here, line 14. We save it, and run again. See, we're good to go. I have one more trick to show you. Blink can also connect to your GitHub code spaces to give you a better experience. So here I have Blink documentation, and it looks like something broke up. So let's fire up a code space and figure out what's going on. Go here. And now, here's the cool thing. Blink is registered as a desktop app, so if we press open, Blink will take it from there. Let's now figure out what's going on. So for that, I'm going to fire up the terminal and run a build. Make myself smaller here. One of the things that I love from code spaces is that I do not have to pollute one of my systems with a lot of extensions and things that I'm never using. The issue seems to be that here in this file, and it's an image called appearance. It's like, yeah, the error is that it should be on caps. So let's make it caps. We can run the build again. Now it's all good. So we're not going to go into details, but you know the drill. From here you will commit and let your continuous integration system take over. And all of this without harming any computers along the way. So this wraps up what you can do with VS Code plus Blink Shell. So next time you're in the Go, you know you can focus on what you do best, code. Thank you.
Carlos, everybody, please welcome Carlos. Do we have Carlos? Is Carlos around for Carlos?
I'm here. Hey, Eric.
Hey,
hello,
Carlos.
everyone.
Hello, and hello, chat. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to be completely honest, man. That's the first time I've seen Blink Shell in action, and that's really freaking impressive.
Thank you. Yeah.
We got a couple questions here. Is it iOS only?
Yes, at the moment we are focused on an iOS only app. That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. So no plans for our Android folks in the future?
Maybe in the future. Yeah, maybe in the future. Like the difficulty that we have is like we to make all of this work that you have seen, all the SSH code that we have is very complex. So to plug everything into Android, it will require us more time, but we will get to it. Yeah.
And I did notice that you installed a Blink file system extension. What exactly does that do on the iPad?
Yeah, so normally when you run vscode.dev, you do not have access to the local file system of the iPad, right? So what this extension does is it enables local file system, so you can access even files on other applications, or for example, if you want to edit Markdown files, or if you want to also connect through SFTP to another server, you can edit files on a remote server. And that is what I was doing, for example, in the demo, connecting to the Raspberry Pi. So the extension is kind of like an interface between VS Code for the web and the iOS subsystem for files.
Gotcha, because I know that for vscode.dev on an iPad, you can open a local file, but you actually have to upload the, if you have an iPad, you go to vscode.dev, you can see this, you try to open a file, you have to actually upload that file to the browser. Is the experience, I assume, is different for local files with Blink Shell?
Exactly, yeah. In Blink Shell, like at the moment, you can just type code and the name of the file, and it will open it for you. You do not have to upload anything to the server, or to the browser, yeah.
Carlos, man, we're getting more questions about an Android version of VS Code. Where's it at?
Yeah.
The people want it. All right, Chris said, Carlos, great presentation. Good, sir. I learned a lot. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Let's see. I got this live recommended to me after I rage quit VS Code IDE and turned off my computer. So this person, I think they're saying this event got recommended to them after they rage quit VS Code. You're welcome. I don't know. Sorry, so yeah. Carlos, what should people do today to get started with Blink Shell? If they
people is also asking what you have to do, like if you have to install anything on the remote machine. And so it does not require to install anything on the remote machine. It connects over like an SSH connection. And the only thing you have to do is go into the App Store and download Blink Shell and Code, and you're good to go. Yeah.
Yeah, you already got a lot of fans. Let's see, Brandon.
Yeah, I see it. Thank you, guys.
This is sweet. Yeah, Blink Shell looks great. Yeah, I agree. It looks really good. Does Blink install something on the remote machine?
No, it does not. Yeah, everything works through SSH. So the only thing you have to do is to make sure that you can access or you configure remote access to that machine. That's the only thing there is.
Okay, and how much does Blink Shell? Is there a cost for Blink Shell?
So it's a free download. Blink Shell is a free download, but if you want to buy it, it costs you like $20 a year.
$20 a year. Okay,
it's very cheap. Yeah, it's less than.
So in just one more question, in the Raspberry Pi example, are you basically using the Raspberry Pi as the compute, right? So you're basically running the project on the Raspberry Pi, but editing it from the iPad. Do I have that right?
Yes, you are actually editing it in you're editing it from VS Code for the web, and you are connecting VS Code for the web remotely through Blink to the Raspberry Pi. Yeah.
Very nice. And so essentially you turned a Raspberry Pi into a code space. Yes.
Yes, kinda. Yeah. Basically, yes. That's
what
we're doing. Yeah.
I have a Raspberry Pi somewhere, and I have an iPad right there, just off screen, and I'm definitely doing that today. I'm going to set up a Raspberry Pi and see if I can.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people install like VS Code in the Raspberry Pi itself. But this is a better way because you don't have to install anything really.
Yeah,
it just connects. It just connects itself. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Carlos. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Yeah.
Check out Blink Shell and connect to your Raspberry Pi. Connect to GitHub Code Spaces. It's your world. Thank you for being with us.
Anything.
All right.
Thank you.
You may have heard that according to the creator of the GIF, the correct pronunciation is GIF with a soft G. But did you know this? You can open a GIF in VS Code. Yeah, big deal. But there's an extension from Microsoft called the Hex Editor. And the Hex Editor allows you to open literally anything and look at the guts. So let's do open with Hex Editor, look at this GIF. And you can see that the first 4 places here define that it is the GIF 8 standard. And the next 2 define that it is version 9A. And then the next 2 define the width and height. So it's 480. We look at the next 2 by 270. And if we were to go back and look at this GIF, we can verify, yep, 480 by 270. And you can use that hex editor to do anything you like. By the way, y'all, it's pronounced GIF, not GIF. True or false? I'm not saying GIF. I don't care what the rules are. So in that video, what's interesting is it's VS Code, but we're using it in a different context, right? So yes, you can use VS Code to edit code, but you can also use it to edit hex files. But there are some folks out there that are using VS Code to do completely different things. And they're building extensions to use VS Code almost as a platform. And to show you that, without further ado, I want to bring you a session from the creator of an extension called Thunder. Here it is.
Today we will see how to use Thunder Client extension to test. Today we will see how to use Thunder Client extension to test APIs inside VS Code. So let's first install the extension. After installing the extension, you will see this Thunder icon. So here you will see all your activity. Here you can create all the collections. Here you can create all the environments. So let's first test an API. So you will see the response here, the status, size, and the time here. You can also send headers, authentication, body, and you can do test cases here. Now we will see how to write test cases very easily without any scripting knowledge in Thunder Client. So let's test for response code here. We'll check for response body is JSON or not. We'll also check for response time. We'll check for content type. You can also test for JSON properties. So let's test for message. We can also test for types. Now you can see results for these test cases here. Now we will see how to create collections and environments in Thunder Client. So let's first create a new one. Let's create a sample variable called color. I already have a sample collection, but let's create a new one. You can add new requests and folders here. So let's add a new request. So whenever it matches the environment variable, it will turn green. So you can send the request and see whether the value is passed or not. So you can see the value is passed here. Now you can also run all the requests in a collection. So let's run the sample collection here. Yeah, you can see all the tests have passed in this collection. So that's how you run the collection. The reason why I created Thunder Client as an extension instead of separate tool, because it will save you a lot of time to do development and testing within the same tool. Let's see in action. We'll create a new API and test it. So I already have a demo API which will output welcome to Thunder Client. Let's create a new one. I just create a new endpoint called VS Code, and the message will be hello from VS Code. So let's wait for the hot reload to apply changes. Now you can see the new endpoint hello from VS Code. So that's how easy it is to develop and test APIs within VS Code using Thunder Client. Thank you very much, guys.
That was awesome. Hey, everybody. I am here with Ranga Vadhineni, the creator of the Thunder extension for VS Code. Welcome, Ranga.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me both.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us. Listen, man, the chat is going crazy. There's a lot of people that didn't know about, oh, this is great. I didn't know about this extension. I'm installing this right now. There's just all sorts of folks that are super excited about this. One of my favorite things about this extension is how good it looks. It's one of the best looking interfaces that I've seen in a VS Code extension. Tell us more about how you built that extension and how you got that sort of rich user interface to work inside of VS Code.
Yeah, I mean, like most of people, I use VS Code for development actually, and then use another tool for testing APIs. But I mean, when you're developing in VS Code and then you're testing in another tool, it's like you have to open another tool and it will kind of waste your time. So I thought, let's create a simple, API tool inside VS Code. So I built a very simple tool actually, and also I make sure that UI is very simple and easy to get started rather than too much complex actually. So that's why it's very simple to get started for any new user. So there's no complexity at all. And
yeah,
I had to make sure that UI is very clean. And so it's, all my applications are very clean and simple actually. So that is one of the reasons this application is also very simple and clean actually.
Yeah, it's a lovely extension. So did you built that extension yourself? Is it just you?
Yeah, just me actually, the whole application. Yeah, this is not the first time. I built a lot of application before. So this is like 5th or 6th application built from scratch. So
it's just remarkable. It's so polished. It looks like it was made by a company. So here's a great question. Can you save a request as a text file and save it in source control? Because a lot of times people try to write their API requests, and then they just want to rerun the same tests.
Yeah, all the APIs you create are created like a JSON files actually. So you can save into your workspace and then check into the Git. So your teammate can open the same workspace and run all the tests actually. So you can save into the Git folder, yeah.
You can do that. Okay, that is very nice. So people are asking, what was the extension called again? Y'all, it's the Thunder Client extension. Thunder Client. Just
Thunder Client.
Go look for extensions and look for Thunder. Yeah, I like REST Client because you can, there's a different extension called REST Client. You can save requests as an HTTP file to source control. Yeah, that's a good one too. Let's see. What else, y'all? What other questions for Ranga? What's interesting to me, Ranga, about this extension is that it's sort of a different way to think about VS Code, right? We think about VS Code generally as being a code editor, but you thought about it as being something else, a place where you could deliver an application. How is it that you got there?
Yeah, when I had the problem of, I thought let's find an extension that can do the basic API. So I searched for the extension gallery and then I couldn't find anything. Well, there's a restaurant actually, which is like text file editing actually. I thought I prefer more of a GUI based client. So I thought this is a great opportunity to build the client, from the scratch actually, like a complete application. So, initially it's built for my own needs actually, but once I put it on the GitHub support page, a lot of people requested for additional features actually. So from the last 1 year, we did a lot of additional features. So that's what you're seeing, a very polished application actually there.
Here's a question from Christopher. Does Thunder Client support JWT tokens?
Well, whatever authentication you want to choose, actually, there's a couple of authentication methods. It doesn't create any JWT tokens, but whatever your server supports, actually, it will support them.
And what about James asking? Oh yeah, sorry. Let's do this. Does it do WebSockets connections?
Yeah, not at the moment, but in the future, actually, we are planning to do that. Actually.
Wow, very nice. Feature requests already. Well, let's see. Yeah, GraphQL.
Yeah, you can do GraphQL now actually. If you open the application, there's a body tab actually. So in that you will see a GraphQL tabs. So you can send the GraphQL request.
Does Thunder Client support APIs made with Flask? I think that's a Python.
It should. I mean, it's not dependent on any language actually. Any language, it should work actually.
Let's see. Controls for bypassing SSL for testing. Can you bypass SSL for testing?
Yeah, you can bypass actually. Yeah.
So what do you do? Just like toggle off SSL?
Yeah, there's an option actually. So it will ignore all the SSL errors actually. Yeah.
What about support for gRPC? I'm not.
Yeah, not at the moment. It's in the roadmap actually, so it will be in the future.
Yeah, XML RPC support. Yeah, pretty ancient, but still okay. All right. How are VS Code extensions created, Ranga? More general question there for you, but how are VS Code extensions created? That was the actual question. How did you go about getting started? Yeah.
Well, it's most of them are web views actually, so you can get started very easily. So there's a lot of examples like VS Code extension samples. So you can go to GitHub and you can find them actually. Yeah.
Very nice. How did you come up with the name, by the way? What's the name? Blender is asking, what's the name inspired from?
Well, I thought I needed something better brand name. So I don't know, I came up with, well, initially it was a different name, but I came up with this name actually, Thunder Client. It's more powerful, I thought. So let's use this name actually. And then nobody else has used this name. So I thought it's good actually. It's very unique and it's very easy to remember as well.
All right, that is awesome. So by the way, y'all, I do want to take just a moment and say that we do have our event resources as well. I want to throw those back up. If we can get those on the lower third. Very good, very nice. Y'all can go ahead and visit that. I think everybody, if you haven't already installed the Thunder client, I don't know what you're waiting for. You should have already done it. I did it many weeks ago. Ranga, thank you so much for your contribution to developers everywhere. I mean, it's authors like you that really increase people's productivity. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you for inviting me as well. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Do you code in Python? And if you do you ever wish you had like a Python expert that could just review your code and give you tips on how to make it better? If so, there's this extension for Visual Studio Code that might interest you. If you go to the marketplace in Visual Studio Code, you can look for this extension called Sorcery, and this is the one you will want to install. You will see that it's working once you see these blue squiggly lines on your Python code. So if you hover over it, you're going to see what are the suggestions it is giving for you to apply. And if you click on the light bulb, you can actually apply them. In this case, it wants to convert this loop into a dictionary comprehension. And there we go, all in one line. And I can do that again here. I guess I did not need that variable. That is cool. I hope you find this Python code assistant useful.
And that was Luciana Abud from our Python team. And if you're doing Python, we put a lot of work into Visual Studio Code to making that a great environment for you to do so. And here to show you more about that is a session from Anthony Shaw, developer advocate. Let's check it out.
Hello, VS Code Day. I'm Anthony Shaw, and I'm going to give you a tour of Python in VS Code. So for this talk, there's a couple of things you'll need. First of all, you need VS Code. So you can get this from code.visualstudio.com. The second thing you'll need once you've got Visual Studio Code downloaded is the Python extension, and I'll also be using some features from the PyLance extension, which is an optional add-on to the Python extension, but something that you should definitely consider once you've installed. So once you open up VS Code, go to the extension panel on the left-hand side, and then from here you can search for Python. The Python extension will be right at the top, and then search for the PyLance extension and click and install that extension as well. Once you've got those two extensions installed, you'll also need a copy of Python on your local computer. One of the first things you'll need to do when you open up an existing project or start a new project in Python and you want to work with the Python extension is to tell the extension which Python interpreter to use. You can do this from the command palette if you search for interpreter, and you'll see the Python select interpreter command. As with all Python projects, you should create a virtual environment first and install your requirements into that virtual environment. And there are some resources I can share on how you would do that. When you're working with imported modules, types, classes, functions, anything in Python, the Python extension is going to give you a lot of information as you're coding. And you'll see that as I'm typing, the Python extension is giving me suggestions about functions, attributes, or types that belong in that namespace. There's a couple of things you can do to make navigation a lot easier inside your code base. For example, in this views file, I'm working on some specific classes. If I hover over those, I can see just the doc string, so the information that's been provided by the Django project about what that class is. If I hold down on either the Alt key on Windows and Linux, or the Map key on Mac OS, if I hover over that class, you'll also get both the docstring and the class information, so I can see a bit more context about what's happening with that class. You can also use that to then click on the class, and it will navigate to that from either the package that you're using or from your own code. You can also right-click on a function, a method, or a class, or even a variable that you define in your Python code and do find all references. And it will navigate through your code base and find where you've included that function, where you've called that function, and you can use that as a shortcut to then navigate and find different areas where it's being used. Something else that you get from VS Code is an integrated terminal. So from the terminal menu, if you open up a new terminal, if you have the Python extension installed, it will automatically activate the virtual environment when you open up any additional terminals. Now you can run Python code from the terminal as you would do in any environment, but to get the full debugger capabilities, you're going to want to configure a launch profile. So if you go to the Run and Debug button on the left-hand side in VS Code, then click Run and Debug, you're going to get a wizard to help you navigate through what it is that you want to debug. In my case, I'm working on a Django app, but there are configurations for FastAPI, Flask, and Pyramid. If you're working on a standalone Python script, then pick the Python file option, or if you're working on an installable module, you can pick the module option. If you select Django, it's going to know automatically what commands to run inside the virtual environment. Once you've launched your project inside the debugger, you'll get access to the full debugger setup. This includes both being able to configure specific breakpoints in your code, navigating variables, information, and then also in the debug console, you can type anything that you would normally at a REPL. So if you wanted to get information about specific types in a breakpoint, or you wanted to force a breakpoint or catch any uncaught exception and then handle that directly in the editor, you can do that using this navigation. So that's my quick tour of the Python extension for VS Code and what you can do both coding, navigating, debugging, and testing Python code inside the Python extension. So to recap everything we've gone through, you'll need VS Code, you'll need a copy of Python installed on your local machine, and you'll need both the Python extension for VS Code and the PyLance extension for VS Code. Every time you open up a project, you'll need to make sure that you select the interpreter. That information does get saved, so if you reopen the same project, it will remember which interpreter you used. Thanks for attending VS Code Day. I'm Anthony Shaw, and if you have any questions, please give me a shout. Thank you.
All right, y'all. So Anthony could not be with us to take your questions because he's in Australia, and I think it's like 2 a.m. for Anthony right now. So I'll get to him as many as we've got here. And all right, so let's just take a quick look. What's the theme? I don't know. Isn't that always the question? Like, you see a good theme, you got to know what the theme is. We probably should have put that in all of the sessions. Notes for next time. Sorry about that, Abdul. Let's see. Can I manage Python environments natively in VS Code, or do I need an extension? Andre, I believe you can manage those right within VS Code. The extension should take care of that for you. Let's see. Fairlight, does VS Code have good C, C++ support? Actually, yes. It's a very popular dev environment for C++, believe it or not. Very widely used. All right, y'all. If you've been with us for the whole event, or at least we're at the start, we had a session on vscode.dev from Brigit Murtaugh. We were not able to run it because of technical difficulties. I'm told we got that fixed. And so for the third time, we bring you VSCode.dev. Can we run it?
The VS Code team's original vision was to build a development tool that could run fully in the browser. We're so excited to show you that we've brought that vision to life, and it's available in VS Code for the web, or at vscode.dev. So here I've already gone to vscode.dev, and we're going to see that even though it's in my browser, it looks like the VS Code I'm already familiar with in the desktop. Now, there's a ton of different great things I can do in here. So for instance, I could go ahead and choose to open a folder to work on my local files. I'm going to go ahead and open up this HTML project that I've been working on. Now, once I grant permission to the browser, I can view these files. And as I want to go ahead and work on some CSS and colors, I'll get a color picker, which is super convenient. So let's go ahead and say I want to change the header in this site to this red color. I'll be prompted to save my changes. And over here, I've already been working on the site. I'll reload, and boom, we can see that the change took effect. All right, and so beyond just local files, I can also work on repositories stored elsewhere or different remote repositories. Let's say I'm working on this GitHub repo. What I can do is I can prepend vscode.dev to any GitHub URL, and we're gonna see that it loads up in my VS Code environment. So we're gonna see that the files populate in the Explorer. I have the README here. I'm gonna get the same experience of being able to open preview on the side. So as I make changes, I can preview those changes, all those kinds of awesome things. And now taking a closer look at these buttons on the left, it's gonna be the same activity bar that we're used to in desktop VS Code. So for instance, I can go ahead and search my app, and I can even get multi-file search by enabling indexing. I'm gonna have access to source control. So if I want to go ahead and say I'm really excited about setup, add an exclamation, I can say update README, and just directly commit that change. Now, beyond just GitHub repos, we also have the power in VS Code for the web to work on Azure repos, which are stored in Azure DevOps. And again, I can just go ahead and prepend VS Code dev to that URL. Now we're going to see that it looks just like the GitHub editing experience. My files populate in the Explorer. I can work on them, view them. I'll get different syntax highlighting and language support in the browser, all those kinds of things. And also navigate between different repos directly in VS Code for the web. So over here in the remote indicator on the lower left, I could say open remote repository, and I could choose different repos from GitHub or Azure repos directly. And if I escape out of that, we can also see I have other options. So one thing to note about VS Code for the web is that since it's running entirely in the browser, there isn't any backing compute, which basically means you won't have access to certain VS Code functionality from the desktop where you do have compute. So you wouldn't be able to run your code, or you wouldn't be able to have access to the terminal. So if I select continue working on from the terminal or from that remote indicator menu, I'll see different options. So for instance, for an Azure repo, I could clone it locally. If I was working on a GitHub repo, I'd also get the option to continue in a GitHub code space. We can see in the URL, we have the same pattern that we follow, and it's vscode.dev/ and then some sort of service or project. So for instance here, it's /Azure repos. And in the GitHub example, it's /GitHub. And now these special URLs are called routes. And now beyond just the GitHub or the Azure repos routes, we're also gonna have a variety of other routes that can give us this awesome customized VS Code dev experience. So for instance, there's this theme that I've been interested in trying out, and I can go ahead and say VS Code dev /theme is the route, and then the identifier of the theme. And what we're gonna see is we have some sample files that load up, and VS Code dev is gonna give us this preview of the theme in the browser. And now we have our preview, and we can choose if we like it and we wanna keep using it, we can keep. If we wanna keep exploring some other themes, we don't have to keep it. Now beyond themes, there's a variety of other extensions that'll really make your web experience even more powerful. So for instance, if I open up here, we're gonna see that we have this /CodeTour route, and this route is going to be populated with the CodeTour extension, which gives us these awesome steps to navigate more easily through a repository. So you may be thinking, hey, this looks really cool. Can I just use any extension that I already use in desktop in the web? And the answer is it depends. So as an extension author, if your extension is more than just a theme or a snippet or a grammar, you'll want to make sure that it's web enabled. And we make that super easy and straightforward through this document here. And so this will give you the entire rundown of how to make sure that your extensions are going to work in the browser, different steps to take, and they're going to be structured pretty much just like your regular desktop extensions, just with a few additions. So thank you so much for joining me for this quick overview of the awesome features of VS Code for the web. We'd love for you to go try it out. Just go to vscode.dev. And if you're an extension author, please go ahead and check out this web extension authoring guide. Thank you so much, and happy coding.
All right, success. We finally got Brigit's video to work, although the audio was super low. Yes, we are aware. Can we throw the playlist up? Y'all can watch it on YouTube with the full audio. You'll be fine. All right, Brigit, that was great. I apologize about the technical difficulty, but we've got some great questions here. One of them is, let's see here. Does it work for SVN repos? Subversion? I think that's Subversion, right?
SVN, is that a remote provider or a source control provider?
It's a source control provider. Yeah, I think it's Subversion, SVN.
Okay.
I think that's what that is. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. You should be able to create an extension to work with repos of that kind. So like similar to how we have the GitHub repositories extension or the Azure repositories extension to work with files of those kinds, you should be able to create an extension for other kinds of providers too.
Yeah, that's the idea, I guess, right? That, who knows what will be supported in the future? Is that the right way to say that?
Possibilities in the future.
Future possibilities, yes. Interesting question, not related to VS Code.dev, but can we please bring font ligatures to the terminal? Do font ligatures not work in the terminal?
I don't know, but if you want to bring them, file an issue in the VS Code repo. We'd love to chat about it further.
Yeah, and then what was the extension that you loaded? Russell's asking. Which one? You loaded a couple of extensions there in VS Code.dev.
There were a few extensions. So there's the remote extensions that work on different repositories. So GitHub repositories and Azure repositories. Those should also be included in VS Code for the web by default. Yeah, if they have more details over which extension they're interested in. We looked at some themes. So yeah, I think maybe we looked at Code Swing or Code Tour. Those might have been a couple of
extensions. Code Swing. I think those were the two big ones. Were there any others? I don't think so. Like, you don't need an extension to access Azure DevOps, right?
There is an Azure Repos extension. So
you do need that extension?
That'll be built in though. So like if
Okay.
you're trying to work with it, you should have that. But if you don't have it for some reason, feel free to look up. It's called Azure Repos, similar to how we have GitHub repositories extension for GitHub repos.
So let's see. Is there an extension for dynamic code analysis in VS Code? I don't know.
There could be. Let us know if you find one in the marketplace. And if not, maybe someone could create one. You could create one.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Brigit, so much for being with us again. Our apologies about the audio quality, folks. And to Brigit, that's not her fault at all. Thank you so much for being with us, Brigit, for that great demo of VS Code.dev.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, listen, all of our resources are going to be on YouTube. Let's throw that link up there again. We've gotten to the last part of our event here. Check out that playlist. You can see everything that we did today. You can watch it over and over and over again, because I know that's what you want to do. All of the resources from today's event, because we talked about so much great stuff, right? VS Code.dev, Blink Shell, Laravel, Thunder Client, building your own resume, Python, there's so much. And so we put all of that stuff in a handy set of resources for you as well. So you'll find all of that there. I want to thank everyone for being with us. And for the last one, can we take your question? Please take my question. Can we just throw Shivansh's question up? Please. Done. Wish granted. Thank you so much for being with us today. That's a wrap on VS Code Day 2022. We will see you next year.